If you fancy a bit of this, a little bit of this, and a lot of that, you're in the right place. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel built by Ben. Thanks for joining us again this week. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, put a comment in the comments bar and tell your mates about it. So today on the kitchenette install, we're going to be doing this worktop. I'm going to be showing you how to actually fit the worktop itself. Then we're going to move on to the hob install, and then we're going to go on to the kitchen sink and tap install. So it's quite a long video this time, but I thought we'd better wrap things up with this kitchenette and move on to the next project soon. We've got a big decking to do next. It's a really interesting project what we'll be moving on to, so hopefully you'll stick with us for that as well. Let's jump into it. So as you can see, I just unwrapped the worktop, checked it for damage, chucked it into the corner. I'm not going to lie, this is a very easy worktop install. Just one little length of it is probably the easiest way you're ever going to get a worktop. But what I've done there is just offered it into the corner and then used the carpenter's pencil turned on its side just to mark about 4 or 5 mil onto the worktop in the shape of the wall. So we just turn it round and use the base units as the worktop there. And then what we're going to do is just get the planer out there, the electric planer. I've got a Makita one. I think you know by now most of my tools are Makita. A few Festool bits, but apart from that, mostly Makita. We'll swap over to the GoPro so that we can show you what we're doing here. Now if I've got a really small scribe to do, i.e. not too much material coming off, then I prefer to do it with a planer than a jigsaw, because the jigsaw blades just aren't strong enough when you're not taking enough meat off of them, and they tend to bend all over the place. So yeah, just use the planer on its side, attach the hoover up. Doing everything with a hoover now really, because I don't like dust going everywhere on jobs. It's just a bit old fashioned now. But all I do is just set it quite low, about 0.5 mil, and we just take a couple of runs at the worktop until we're getting somewhere near where the pencil mark is. I don't know if you do it this way, I don't know if it's the right way to do it, it's just always worked for me. And then if you've got some chunkier bits to take off in the middle, you can just set it to 1 mil or 1.5 mil even, and you can just bite into it a little bit and just keep running it past until we hit that pencil mark. As I know, there is an upstand going on this kitchenette, so I wasn't really too worried about it being an absolute snug fit. It had to be a nice fit obviously, because otherwise you're not taking pride in your job, but it didn't have to be bang on perfect. All that had to meet really is the front right corner where it hits the wall and the back left corner where it hits the wall, which will probably make a bit more sense in a minute once we've finished this planing. But yeah, if there's any little holes at the back where it meets the wall there, we know it's just going to be covered by the upstand. So we just flip it round now, offer it up to the wall and see how it fits. As you can see there, it's gone in nicely. That's the corner there, that back left corner. Now because your upstand finishes on the top there, you've got to make sure that that's touching the wall. And the same with that front right corner. If that's not touching the wall, then you're going to have a little gap there. You have to caulk it, it just looks horrible. So just make sure them two corners are nice and tight on this type of install. And then your upstands do the rest. And then what I do is I just pull it away about 15-20mm, and then just use the worktop as a guide to rest the nozzle on that silicone there. Well, it's like a grab adhesive that I just put around the back, just put it around the back perimeter of it, and then we just push it back nice and tight onto that grab adhesive, and it just gives the whole kitchenette, you know, another sort of anchor point really. Keep these little things as strong as possible because they don't weigh a lot, so they don't really tie themselves in unless you fix them nicely. And then we're just putting a bit of pressure on there and squeezing it all back, and then as you would normally just screw through from the underneath. Because there is a sink going in here and a hob, you've got to be careful where you're putting your little L brackets, because in a lot of these tiny kitchenettes the sink and hob actually fit quite tight into them bottom carcasses. So if you're going to start sticking L brackets everywhere, you're bound to hit one with your jigsaw, so just bear that in mind. It's important just to keep measuring that gap in the middle there as well, like you just saw me do. Because at this stage it's very easy just to over tweak a screw or over tighten something, and it just kicks them carcasses round. It can only be a few mil, but that'll just spoil the opening size for the fridge to go in the middle. So just try and keep that nice and constant all the way through the install. Keep checking it, there's no harm in doing it. And then if you see that something's pulled in, or if you see that that size has got smaller or bigger, you can just correct it as you go. So here I'm just marking out the centre point of that bottom carcass there, roughly on the top of the worktop, getting ready to measure out for the hob. I'm going to switch over to the GoPro soon so that you can see that a bit clearer, but literally all I'm doing, I've already got the size for the hob, so I'm just marking out a centre point. And then what I tend to do is just half the size, like half the width and half the height of it, and then I just mark away from that centre point. It's always the way I've done it. I don't know if there's an easier way of doing it. If you do it a different way, just let us know. Take it into consideration. But with the sink that we got there, you can see I've just got the template out there. Some of these manufacturers send a template with them, but I always double check the template as well, because sometimes you cut that and it's a bit too slack or just doesn't really fit too nicely. So always double check these things before you're cutting your worktop, because one little mistake here and it's game over, you're buying a new worktop. So just be careful at this point. So you can see me now just checking that template. What I usually do is just mark my center points on that template and then line it up with my center points that I've put on the worktop. And you can just make sure you're nice and central to that bottom carcass then. And then we just very carefully try not to move that template as we go. You can tape it down at this point if you want, but I just sort of hold it steady as I go. Just mark tiny little bits of it, just make sure you're keeping it nice and flat, not twisting it at all. And just get that marked out and ready to tape up. So at this point we're just going to get a bit of masking tape on now. That's it, a lot of people just put that masking tape sort of halfway over the line and then you're struggling to see the line, or some people masking tape it up first and just put loads on there and then they draw their line on top of the masking tape and cut it out. I just prefer just to put your masking tape on the outside of your cut. Doesn't matter about any burst out that happens on the inside of that cut, because obviously you're cutting that bit out. So yeah, just get your masking tape on the outside of that line, and then also just acts as a clearer line for you to go to with your jigsaw. So once you're cutting it out, you just follow your masking tape really, apart from your radius corners. Just got to be careful with them. Then I'll just double it up a little bit there so that the bed of the jigsaw doesn't scratch the workpiece at all. The vibration on them things can be quite rapid, especially with a down cutting blade. It can vibrate quite a bit. So yeah, just make sure you double that up. You don't want any of that jigsaw bed touching that worktop, because it just leaves tiny little scuff marks everywhere. Never been keen on that, so yeah, get taped up and then on to the next bit. Okay, so we just get a spade bit in the drill now. We just do this right on the edge there, just so that we've got some nice little entry points for the jigsaw blade to go in, and also some relief points really. If you try and turn too many corners with a jigsaw in this sort of thickness material, it always ends up going at a bit of an angle. I mean, even this cut that I do now ends up going at a bit of an angle. I've never been able to solve that problem really, unless you do just straight cuts and put a hole in every corner, and then, you know, it's just, maybe that's what I should have done here, but I'll just do it the way I do it really. Never really been too fond on jigsaws. I've seen a couple of people use Festool rail saws for this cutout, but I did it on a mate's worktop a long time ago, and ended up with kickback off of the rail saw, and it went right through the shot off and went straight through the nosing of the worktop. Absolutely ruined it. So I've always been a bit scared of sticking that back on there again. I know why it happened, and that's because I didn't support it properly underneath, so it obviously trapped the blade when it went through enough. But again, once you've been stung by that sort of thing, it's horrible to then pick that tool up again and do the same thing. So I'm just sticking that there just to make sure really. I'm always so cautious with worktops because in my eyes they're a bit of a kryptonite for a carpenter, because you don't get paid a lot to install them, and yet if you make one little mistake you're you know, paying for a new worktop. So I try to avoid them if I can. I don't mind little kitchenettes like this because there's not too much to go wrong, but when you're talking about carpenter's miters, you know, like on a U-shaped kitchen or an L-shaped kitchen, I tend to stay away from them if I can. I go for the stuff I'm more comfortable with. But yeah, everyone's got their little bits that they don't like doing. Worktops is one for me. So we just have a quick hoover up before we get the jigsaw out. Don't like dragging all this sawdust across the worktop again under the bed of the jigsaw. Again, it just puts loads of little sort of micro scratches across the surface. You can't really see them too much until you get the light on it. So yeah, it's important you just hoover up everything now, get that all sorted, and then we just jigsaw out on that inside line of the masking tape. As you can see, it's a down cutting blade, so it's a bit of a slow process. I think we'll speed this bit up so that you can just see the next part. And then the reason I put that hole in the middle there is just to get your finger in whilst you make that last little final cut. Just before everything drops through. It's just handy so that you don't have to sort of get down on your knees and try and hold the bottom of it. Yeah, it just makes it nice and easy. You can see a few of them cuts are a little bit on the piss, but don't think there's too much to worry about really, as long as you go back and square them off if need be. But on this case the hob fits straight in there, so there's no point. So we just take all of that tape off of there. And get that all ready to try the hobbing. We're off at the hob up now. It's quite a nice one, this little one, little induction number. Nice and tidy looking. And there we go, just plop straight in. And there's your hob finish from a carpenter's point of view. Obviously the electrician's got to come in and wire it in. I don't like to stick anything down at this point, just in case the electrician's got to get that back out and do anything underneath it to connect it. It's never a good idea just to stick it all down at this point. So get ready for the sink cut out now. And then again with that little hole in the middle there, we just take the weight of the piece that's going to fall. That just stops that from going through and smashing into the cupboard below. Nice little tip there. So we just plop the sink in, see if it fits nicely, and it does. So we'll just take that back out, have a quick little hoover up, and then we get ready to install the tap. So we're just marking out the centre there, because the back of this had one of them sort of concealed wastes which didn't quite fit in this sort of worktop depth. It's probably made for a sort of quartz worktop or something a bit shallower. So what I'm doing is I'm just marking that out, and then we'll get the multi-tool and cut that little slot so that that waste fits in there nicely. Now I have changed my multi-tool since, as you might have seen from one of my previous videos. I've now got the Starlock Makita one, the new one. I wish I had it for this job actually, but as you'll see here, this one's a bit knackered and the multi-tool blade just gets super hot. Smoke starts going everywhere. It's a bit of a nightmare, but it gets the job done at least. Haven't had to do this with many sinks with this sort of waste outlet, and you've also got to be careful not to go too far into the worktop there, because you've obviously got the tap hole to go at the back, so we don't want to make all of that sort of back section too weak. Otherwise we might be dealing with a bit of a collapse in the future there. Too much water gets into it. So yeah, it's always important just to take out what you need and not too much excess. I think in this case I didn't take enough out, and when that sink goes back in I realised that. So you'll probably see me take out a little bit more as I go to put the tap in. So there, we'll just get the sink back in there, try it back out. And then the next thing to do is just to mark out roughly where that tap's going to go. In this case it did go in the centre. Sometimes you can off centre it if the customer wants, or you can stick it by the side of the sink if you really want, but I've done some strange things for customers, depends what they want. This one was a fairly generic thing for a HMO, so it just went at the back there just to keep it all neat and tidy. And then we just mark out halfway between the back of the sink and where the splashback will finish as well. It just makes that nice and even. Where the base of the tap ends up, just ends up even between there. And then we're just taking a bit more meat out, like I told you, for that waste that sits on the back of the sink. And as you can see when you're wearing that GoPro, it's not always the easiest to keep the camera on the thing that you're doing, so apologies for that shot. So next thing to do is just get the hole saw on the drill, and that's the tap that was holding my laser up, so no more laser, but we'll drill the hole for the tap and get that installed. So when I drilled out for this tap, I realised that I was then hitting the actual backboard to the unit. So again, we just had to make some little decisions based on that, and I had to cut out a little bit of that backboard ready for the sort of gubbins of the tap to fit in, because you get the two flexi pipes that come off of the back of the tap. And when you're doing carpentry jobs like this, it's never just straightforward, ever. I don't think I've ever just had an easy job that's all gone completely right. You have to make these little adaptations on site. Because I knew that this would sit behind the bulk of the sink, I wasn't too worried about cutting too much out. It's never seen. It just makes it work, doesn't it? I suppose in hindsight you could have put the tap off to one side or something like that just to make it fit within, but then you're looking at encroaching in that area where the fridge has got to go, or you're coming too close to the left hand side of the carcass. It's just thing is with these tiny kitchenettes is you're trying to squeeze so much into a small area. It doesn't always work, so you've got to use a little bit of magic to get it all in. So we're just going to multi-tool the back of that panel out there, and that should do the job. You can always see I do plenty of twisting and turning with that multi-tool. You see a lot of people with multi-tools just go in flat with a blade and just hold it until it goes all the way through, and you will burn a blade out like that. And you'll also burn the multi-tool out as well, because it just takes too long. You do need to rock them blades, as if you were a saw really. You wouldn't just hold a saw flat and just keep on going at the bit of wood. You sort of rock it forwards a bit, pull it back a bit. You sort of keep tilting it so that you're always cutting the smallest amount of wood with the blade possible. I'll explain that in another video if some of you don't understand that, but yeah, there's a bit of a technique to it just to make it go through a lot quicker. As you can see there, I just dropped the tap in. Didn't want to show you too much of that because that's more to do with plumbing. We'll leave that for the plumbers' channels. But we're on the carpentry channel at the moment, so we'll stick with the woodwork stuff. So we just have a good old tidy up and a hoover now. Just see me here, just quickly bang some handles on. The little doorknobs. Don't need to show you too much to do with that really, you just sort of put them in the corners. I can show you another time if you want, but I think we just run out of time this day. I had to pack up and go. I was only employed on this day just to do what I did. The fridge was going in another day, and the upstands were going in another day because there was a big scaffold on the stairs and we couldn't get the upstands up there at that time. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I know it's been a bit lengthy, but like I said, I just wanted to get this kitchenette series out of the way now, and we'll get on to the next one for you. If you like the video, then chuck a thumbs up on it. Give us a comment because that boosts the views for me. And tell your mates about it. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell if you want to get notified every time I post a video. And apart from that, just thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one, guys. Have a good one.